Hi, how's it going? I'm Jason, and I love electronic music, and I love the gear we use to make it. And today I want to talk about melodies. We're going to go a little more toward the advanced end in terms of the concepts here, but I have a feeling we're taking something you already know and just pushing the boundaries a little bit. I want to talk about how we can take existing melodies and make them more epic, more memorable, make sure that they aren't boring. And so I'm going to be showing you some tips to add interest. Okay, so let's dive into that. But before we do, make sure to like and subscribe if this sounds good to you. Let's jump in. Okay, the first method here is adding interesting rhythm. Now, when you start out with melodies, your temptation is probably going to be to keep it in the grid. So let me show you an example here where we are just playing quarter notes and it's just each melody note is happening on the grid. Now, as you can see, that doesn't sound very interesting for very long, but if we start to add syncopation, it can get a lot more interesting. Now, suggestion here, it's a good idea to start to get used to 8th notes and 16th notes to be able to understand kind of what's going on in between the beats. And in order to do that, I totally recommend practicing this. Develop a little bit of a practice routine where you are getting used to what these sound like and what they feel like. So let me give you an example. You get a beat going, and start practicing 8th notes. The way you count 8th notes is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, like that. So what you would do is just play a note. Start with quarter notes and then move to 8ths. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Get used to playing different notes. Right? So you get used to the sound of 8th notes, the feel of 8th notes. And once you're there, then you can start experimenting with syncopation, because what you're doing with syncopation is you aren't playing on the downbeat. Instead, you are playing on the upbeats, on the offbeat. So here would be some syncopation practice. Let's try it just in between. And another thing we can do is a common rhythm where you have a dotted quarter note and an 8th note. It sounds like this. Right, just to get used to what it feels like to play off the beat. And you would do the same thing with 16th notes. Now, if you'd like for me to go into more detail, feel free to post that in the comments below. If you'd like extra help with it, I would totally be willing to meet one-on-one to try to help you. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like in context now. So we've got our chord progression. We had that kind of stale melody. So let's hear that again. Now let's inject some syncopation. I'm going to start it on the offbeat, and I'm going to play around with downbeats and offbeats using just 8th notes. Let it go around. Here we go. Sounds a lot more exciting, well, maybe not exciting isn't the right word, but it's a lot more fun, a lot more danceable. And especially when you start getting into 16th notes, it can sound even more funky. So let me show you that. just allows you to add a lot more fun to the melody by introducing syncopation, by shifting the melody so it's not always in the grid. And what you want to do is just kind of play around with it until you find something that you like. That's the first way, where we are adding more interesting rhythm to make our melodies sound more epic and memorable. Let's now move into the second idea here. And what I want to start talking about now is how to make melodies that don't just utilize chord tones, but use non-chord tones as well, or what are called extensions. This is an important aspect of jazz music, especially modern jazz music, and it's something that epic and memorable melodies use in electronic music. Okay, let's talk a little bit about chord tones and non-chord tones. Now, in order to make chords, all you have to do is remember a couple of things here. First, that every chord has just 3 notes. That's right. This is something that I find students get confused on, because when you're playing a guitar, often you're playing 6 strings, so 6 notes. Or when you see people playing a keyboard, they're playing with more than just 3 fingers. But when it comes to a basic chord, when you see a G chord, a C chord, a D chord, any of those letter name chords, it's just 3 notes. And that goes for the minor chords as well. Okay, so remember that, because what's happening when you have 6 strings being played or more notes being played, it's just doubling those 3 notes. Now, what are those notes? Well, that's pretty simple as well, especially if you stick to some keys that don't have many sharps or flats. We're going to be sticking with the key of C or A minor, because they both don't have any sharps or flats. They're just on the white keys. And that way you can see how every chord within those scales just utilizes this same pattern, okay? Now, this is the second thing you need to remember, that every chord has 3 notes, and those 3 notes are stacked in thirds. 3 is a theme here. So if you want to create a C major chord, you're going to start with the root where the chord gets its name, so that's a C, and then you're just going to stack thirds on top of that. And thirds, it's just counting by 3s, and you make sure that you include the first note. So a third up from C is E, and we just count 1, 2, 3. So there's what we call the third. So that's an important note. It tells us what kind of chord this is, that it's a major chord, just by the sound of it. Now, in order to get the third note in the chord, you're just stacking another third on top of that. So 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, there's the first, and then 1, 2, 3, there's the second one. There's our C major chord. That's all it takes. And that's the same thing for every chord. So if you want to make an F major chord, you would just start with the F, and you would count up by 3. And that's the way it's always going to look when you're in the key of C. G major. Okay. We'll stop there. We could talk more about how to understand whether chords are major and minor, but I think that kind of takes us beyond what we're trying to achieve today. But what you can see is also the minor chords work the same way within the key. And so if you want to start playing around with this, you'll see that each chord has the same pattern to it. So there's C major. That's a chord on D. It's actually D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor. That one's a confusing one. The chord based off the 7th tone is actually a diminished chord. Don't worry about it. And then back to C. So that's our chords. Now, the reason why we needed to talk about that is because we want to start to understand when we're playing a chord tone and when we're not when it comes to the melody. Chord tones are guaranteed to sound good in a melody, but they can also sound a little boring if that's all that we're playing. So I'm going to give you an example. Now, this is a chord progression from a new song that I've been working on that I'm going to be releasing on Deep Life Records in the near future. It's called Nothing's Gonna Stop Us. So the chord progression in it is pretty simple. It's again in A minor, And so it's all white keys. So here's the chord progression. See how all those stacked third chords, A minor, G major, F major, and D minor. Okay. Now, let me play a melody. I'm going to play this melody in the same rhythm as the actual melody to the song, so you can kind of hear the contrast when I'm starting to use non-chord tones. So that's the same rhythm as the melody that I use. And as you can see, I'm just using a lot of roots and thirds. So A minor, you can see how I was playing. And then I was just playing that, the fifth of the G, and then I'm playing the root and the third of F, and the root and the third of the D minor. Right? Not very interesting sounding. Right? You wouldn't want to listen to that for very long. I mean, it's technically correct, but it doesn't sound very pretty. Now, let me show you the actual rhythm, the actual melody, and you'll see the difference here. The melody utilizes a lot of non-chord tones or extensions. So let's listen to that. Okay, so that's the actual melody. Same rhythm, but different notes. What I'm doing is playing a lot more non-chord tones, as I said earlier, and you can see it when I play the chords along with it. Instead of playing the root and the third, I'm going from the third to a non-chord tone, the D. See how much more interesting that sounds. And those are all non-chord tones. And then, right, it starts with a chord tone, the C, and then it goes to a non-chord tone. And then it starts on a non-chord tone with the D minor. Hopefully you can hear the difference. I mean, at a certain point, melodies are kind of subjective, so maybe that wasn't quite your cup of tea, but that's something that I really enjoyed. And again, I'm utilizing non-chord tones or extensions. If you'd like to know more about those, leave a comment below. Would love to chat further or create another video that dives a bit deeper into extensions. Yeah, so that's how you make your melody sound more interesting, by introducing extensions. So be sure to try that out. Make sure to pay attention to when you're using chord tones and when you're not. This will start to become more and more second nature as you get used to it. Again, it takes a bit of practice, but it is well worth it. So that's the second way. Let's now look at the third way, and now we're talking about the harmony itself. You might have a melody that you kind of like the sound of, but just with the chords, it's not sounding kind of gritty enough, or dark enough. So what we're going to do here is keep the melody the same, but start to tinker with the harmony. We're going to get into what are called borrowed chords to add a whole different vibe. The melody stays the same, but the chords change. What we're doing is we are borrowing chords from what's called the parallel minor. So every major scale has a parallel minor scale, and that parallel minor has different chords within it. Now, it's simple to find the parallel minor. All it is, it's the same scale, but minor. So D major, the parallel minor is D minor. A major, it's A minor. C major, C minor. So within each of these scales, we have certain chords, right? We saw it in the A minor or C major scale. We had C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and C major, okay? So that's the chords within C major. Now, if we were to go into the parallel minor, here's what it would sound like. We have C minor, we have D diminished, and then we have E flat major, then we have F minor, and then we have G minor, we have A flat major, and then we have B flat major. Okay, so that's the chords in the parallel minor, just following the chords that follow the scale. Okay, so when we borrow a chord, we are just kind of trying out the chords from that parallel minor. So say we have a simple chord progression going C, and then F major, and then G major, and then A minor. It's okay, but kind of vanilla. Now let's try to add some borrowed chords. F minor. So we borrowed that F minor. Adds a little bit of tension, a little bit of dissonance. Well, let's try adding in a different chord for the G major and the A minor and keep the C and the F. Doesn't sound very good. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, I've created a bit of a chord progression in the D major scale. It's a little bit easier because D minor and D major, we're talking about less sharps and flats. Here's what it looks like. Okay, so only 2 black keys. And when it comes to the D minor scale, the parallel minor, we only have to worry about 1 black key. Okay, so the chord progression I've got going starts on a D major, and then it goes to a G major, and then you could go to a B minor, and then back to G, and then A. Sorry for the mistake. So it's an okay chord progression. It's not going to be making any hits from that. But if we bring in some borrowed chords, we're starting to get a whole different flavor. So what I want to try to do is, instead of playing a B minor chord, I'm going to play a B flat major chord, which we're taking from that parallel minor. So check out what this does to the vibe. Right? Quite different. Now, what if we added another borrowed chord? Instead of going to the G major, we went to a G minor chord. Listen to how that would sound. And then... Okay, just gives you an idea of what you can do with the chord progression. Now, here's the melody that we're going to be using, and it's just going to be a simple melody that is utilizing basically the root note of the first chord, and it's going to be chord tones for a lot of these other chords. So it's like this. Okay, so the melody is quite simple. You can see how it's a lot of chord tones, and it is introducing some syncopation though. And there are some non-chord tones in there as well. So we're kind of utilizing the other steps. Now the thing is, it sounds pretty vanilla because of the chords that are going on underneath it. So this trick that we're learning is you can keep the melody the same. If it's sounding like a melody that you like, but just not enough tension, then you can add in some borrowed chords, borrow from the parallel minor. And that's what we're doing with this one. We're going to be borrowing, instead of playing that B minor as the third chord, we're going to be playing a B flat major. Okay. So let me show you what this one sounds like. Did you hear what a difference switching from the B minor to the B flat major made? And you can, once you kind of get a taste for it, you can start to add in other borrowed chords and see where it leads you. Again, keeping the melody the same. Now, if that's helpful, here is a chart that shows you some keys and their parallel minors. You can write these down and choose a key to play a song in, and then start to experiment with borrowed chords to see what sounds good. This is something that deadmau5 uses a fair amount. Actually, his most famous tune, I Remember, very much uses some borrowed chords. It starts out in what you think is going to be B major, but then it actually switches into B minor before returning back to B major again. So it's kind of dancing between those two scales, and that's how it creates that really cool sounding harmony to it. Okay, so that's the third way of introducing more interest, creating more epic and memorable melodies, and that was introducing borrowed chords. So I hope you found this really interesting, and I know I got into some probably new concepts for you. So if you have any further questions, leave a comment below. I'm interested in trying to teach this in a way that's accessible and that kind of doesn't jump too far into more advanced harmony. I recognize that this takes a little bit of understanding harmony to begin with, but my opinion is that it's well worth diving into that a little so that you can kind of grow in your melodies and in your harmony, in your songwriting, and you don't feel limited. To me, that the more you have these, they're like tools in the toolbox, so the more things you can do. All right, let's finish there. And if you liked this, please like and subscribe and share. Until next time then, take care. Bye.